Hello and good morning. My name is Alvin Abraham.
My name is Summer.
My name is Jose Rodriguez.
My name is Rosie Rodriguez.
And I'm Owen Moskowitz, and this is our presentation of the impact of extending voting rights. Our team claim was the extension of voting rights through lowering the voting age and implementing of a federal ID program will impact voter participation. Through the eyes of a minority, I claimed that the government will hear my vote through lowering the voting age. As you can see, the data from Dr. McDonald shows that from 1986 to 2018 has increased by 10%. Averagely, there's around 50% of minorities showing up and attending polling stations. This is relevant to the claim because it states that through more minorities showing up, it will encourage other minorities to show. Another resource I used was the 26th Amendment, which states that you cannot deny the right to vote to any U.S. citizen or minority of age. This will help encourage minorities because they will see 17-year-olds voting as well.
The Yale Law Journal titled The 26th Amendment Enforcement Power by Eric S. Fisher states how when they first lowered the voting age, 18-year-olds were prevented from registering due to the fact that they didn't have a valid license for that state or that they were still under their parents' address. Local governments also implemented things such as placing polling places away from college campuses or even splitting two legislative districts between college campuses. These are examples of how 18-year-olds were discriminated when they first lowered the voting age and how they had to implement a brand new amendment changing the law of the land and impacting the country. In The Revolution Will Not Be Fruitful by Heather Lillard, Heather illustrates the recklessness of 18-year-olds. This new group of voters must be informed and care about elections in order for them to be valid and reliable. The author argues that it is difficult to understand and that elections are a heavy subject that not all will care about. This will impact individuals' future as a variety of new voters will have to decide. As voting is a heavy subject and the decision is something that they will have to live with for the rest of their life.
The requirement of a federal ID program discriminates against low-income voters and their participation in elections because low-income voters, which include disproportionately the elderly and the young population, they're less likely to adhere to an ID system. For example, the 26th Amendment Enforcement Power by Eric B. Fish demonstrates that a 2006 survey in Indiana in which it demonstrates that at as many as 18% of Americans over the age of 65 could be disenfranchised by a federal ID program or were disenfranchised by a federal ID program because they had to present a government-issued photo ID, and that essentially, it's more difficult for the elderly population and the young population to get IDs just because of the economic cost of it and the effort that it takes. For example, young people, college students, age 18 to 30 are less likely to have their own address. Therefore, they are less likely to have their own government-issued ID, and this would disenfranchise them. How this would affect the voter demographic? In the voter turnout demographics graphs by Dr. Michael McDonald, it shows that as many as 66% of the elderly are less likely to, are more likely to vote. Therefore, with a federal ID program, it will completely change how the demographics work and therefore limit the amount of participation that the elderly can have in federal elections.
When we look at extending voting rights from an ethical standpoint, if we consider a federal legislator making laws against voter discrimination, we can prevent many incidents like so. In the Yale Law Journal 26th Amendment Enforcement Power by Eric Fish, he states that if we implemented a federal ID program, that it would discriminate against minorities. This would only happen if we didn't have the right rules and regulations in place that would prevent minorities from voting. And this is shown in the 26th Amendment. The 26th Amendment prevents any age-based discrimination. And unjust regulations in states. When we implicated this, it created more equal voting systems. This provides a model of how ethical laws and regulations can be written and in the future to make federal and state elections equal through the whole entire country.
So political candidates will have to think about the new demographics if you extend the voting rights. In Source 8 by Dr. Michael McDonald, it shows that this graph shows the ethnicity. It shows the ethnicity population slowly being on the rise than what it was before. And if you extended the voting rights, that would make this change much more seeable, and it would make it pretty hard for a certain candidate to win by using only one kind of demographic. Another new source of evidence is Albridge Gerry and the Monsters Gerrymander by Algernon Tisdale. He basically says that gerrymandering is an unethical term used from political candidates to redraw the district lines in their favor. If you were to extend the voting rights or if you were to lower the voting rights to 17, or if you were to extend it to have more low-income families, you'd be able to throw a wrench in their plans because the new demographic would shuffle up the region, and it would be pretty hard for the next decade for them to be able to figure out how their vote is going to be displayed and make it more equal. After 10 years, it will be a little less harder, but the new amount of people will think more radically, and they will always kind of shuffle it a little bit because they do not have any previous record of political history. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, thanks guys. We have 5 questions for you. Summer, I'm going to start with you. If you would, describe an argument from one of your peers' individual reports that makes you think differently about your team's conclusion.
In Jose's point, he said how if we implicated a federal ID system, it would impact the minorities like elderly people and young voters. And it made me think differently from the team's conclusion, because we said this would increase voter turnout, but this actually brings a valid point that goes against mine, so we refuted it in the presentation.
All right, thank you. Rosie, you're up next. What is a way in which your team's resolution makes you think differently about your own individual research?
So my team concluded that voter participation would increase at first, like when we were first doing it, but actually through the lens of through the futuristic lens of when I covered, I came to the conclusion that because of the past, because of age-based discrimination when they first lowered the voting age, it doesn't necessarily increase it. It has an overall impact, but it doesn't necessarily increase or decrease it. It just just impacts.
All right. Thank you. Jose, in the future, what change would you make to your group norms, and how would you expect that to improve your team's presentation?
An example of like a group norm, I guess, would be to practice more often and meet. Like we would essentially hold each other accountable in order to make the presentation the greatest it can be, as in like feed off each other's points rather than encompass it all in one single claim. Kind of apply another team member's point to my own point and vice versa. That's
All right. Owen, reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem?
I would say Jose had the overall impact because his kind of contradicted all of our standpoints, while Summers was like the rebuttal, and so it had my claim, the minorities will get the government to hear their vote. It was created through his decisions of that voter participation will not be impacted by the lowering voting age.
All right. And Alvin, in what ways did you improve your ability to work with the group as a result of this project?
Working around people's schedules made it necessary that I had to do some of the work on my own. I couldn't just rely on one person to do all the work. We had to between meetings, we had to do our work, make sure that everything was on time. And if none of us got our work on time and we were finished, we would help them fix through it before we got started. So definitely that is a factor in helping.
You guys are done. You can breathe.